I feel really strongly about small to medium sized nonprofits because, for one reason, the big ones generally have a lot of expertise and they have a lot of staff. And so I feel like we can make a bigger impact by helping the small ones that, they have some fantastic people. Maybe there's some gaps in what they're able to do. Um, and also with the small groups, I felt, I'm generalizing here. There are definitely exceptions, but other than smaller organizations, they are able to respond quickly to urgent needs. I think in the Ukraine is a great example. And actually, another example, maybe 10 years ago, you may remember there were terrible earthquakes in Kathmandu. And, the big global animal charities flew in to help. And I had lived in Kathmandu for some time, and I was working in Thailand at Soy Dog Foundation, and I flew in also to help. And the partnership between the local Nepali groups and the big international ones was really powerful. Through the international expertise and the specialization with the local knowledge and the cultural knowledge and just that experience of working in the country and knowing how to get things done with the government and with local people was really invaluable. And then after some time, the big international groups left, and the small local organizations were still there dealing with the repercussions of these earthquakes and all these, farmed animals that were injured when sheds collapsed and, pets that were left homeless. And so, especially with emergencies and disasters, the local groups, they're there for the long term. It's terrific when a big organization can fly in and, make an impact, but they're not going to stay for years or for decades. And so I feel like by building capacity of local organizations, they're the ones who are living there, and that's what we need. We need that sustainability, not just the immediate, exciting disaster response.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I want to go back to Ukraine because you brought it up a couple times. And I know that is one of the main focal points of your work. I'd love to know a little bit more specifically about your work there. Could you shed some light on that for us?
Yeah, I guess we can start from the beginning. So I was actually doing a consulting job for an animal charity in Romania that was just a couple. So I was living just a couple hours drive from the Ukrainian border, and I started this job 3 or 4 days after the war started in Ukraine, and and it became clear to us that we had to do something about this. We couldn't just have life as usual running an animal shelter when this horrific war was happening almost in our backyard.
Mm.
And so at that point, there were a lot of Ukrainian refugees leaving the country. And so we set up stations at the border to help people with pets. There were different nonprofits had set up different tents at the border crossing. There was one for the Red Cross had a tent, and there's one for people with small children, and then a tent for helping people organize transportation onward. And nobody was helping people with animals, and so we set up a tent for that. There were people coming across. It was middle of winter, a really cold part of the world. People, they didn't have leashes. They had little dogs and cats in their jackets, huddled against the cold. Some of them didn't have pet food. So we were providing these supplies and giving them advice about the import laws of bringing animals into the EU or bring them to other countries. And that was, yeah, that made a huge difference for people in, one of the worst times in their lives.
So from the border, we started getting some food and other like little things for the animals just across the border, but already into Ukraine. And then from the first village after the border, it was spread into maybe some kilometers into Ukraine, and that's how we started knowing people. That's how we started trusting people, understanding also not just the urgency of the people fleeing the country, but also what was left. That was the animals at the border that could not cross. And we just had like hit face to face with the reality. And from there, we started working more and more into not just helping at the border, but getting tons of food for animals in dire need. That could be cats, dogs, guinea pigs. I mean, there were many animals, but basically we focused on the cats and dogs. And from there, we started contacting people. Well, actually, people started contacting us through Instagram, through Facebook. We know that you're helping. Can you help us out? And then we kind of had to do some like tiny background check because there can be some scammers, unfortunately. And yeah, and then we started spreading, and we just from the little village after the border, we just went to Odessa. We just went to the north of Ukraine, and we ended up helping out many different areas, and covering almost to the front line, and helping the military, and helping like not just that, but also not just with food, but also with sterilization program that you can talk about, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So initially food was really the biggest need, just these like dogs and cats that were house pets for their whole lives and were out on the streets starving. I mean, literally starving. It was awful. And so because going back to what we were saying earlier about the big organizations, so yeah, the big international organizations, unless they already had staff in Ukraine, they weren't allowing their disaster teams to go into Ukraine because it was still considered dangerous. It's not like an earthquake where it's happened and then it's safe afterwards. So instead of them sending their own teams, they were supporting smaller groups like ours by making donations, enabling us to buy tons and tons of dog food and leashes and collars and dog jackets. And in the beginning, yeah, food was the greatest need, but Ukraine hasn't had a culture of spaying and neutering their pets. A lot of people just felt like it wasn't necessary. There wasn't really a lot of information about it. So a lot of these abandoned pets were having puppies and kittens, and sadly, a lot of these puppies and kittens weren't surviving, as you can imagine, with no one to take care of them. And so we started to work with local vet clinics and organize spay neuter projects in different towns and cities and villages. So that complemented the pet food donations. And actually, the two really complemented each other. And even what we're doing now, I mean, we're in touch every day with our partners in Ukraine. And I mean, a typical way one of these projects develops is that we will buy some tons of dog and cat food from a Ukrainian, like a local mom and pop pet food manufacturer, and we'll distribute it to a few volunteers who we know, and then they distribute it to more volunteers they know, and then they go out regularly and put it out on the streets for the dogs and cats, and some of them will report back and say, hey, I'm feeding cats in the village of Sarata, and I've noticed there are a lot of cats and dogs that aren't spayed and neutered, and we're seeing some kittens and puppies now. And then that will come back to us, and I'll ask some questions like, how many are there? Can you pick them up, or are they really shy and afraid of people? And if we can make it happen, then I'll reach out to a vet clinic that we work with and coordinate things. We'll say, okay, on these 2 days, this veterinary team will, drive a couple hours, pack up all their supplies, set up a temporary clinic in maybe a public building or a hotel or lobby or something like that. And the volunteers who feed the dogs and cats bring them in for sterilization. They spay and neuter them, they vaccinate them for rabies. And it's worked really well to help manage these populations and prevent a true crisis of pet overpopulation.
That's really exciting work. It sounds like, if my timeline is right, that this is work you did before you founded Animals Unbound. I'm kind of curious whether this was kind of the light went on that this sort of thing that you were doing there could be turned into an organization that would be able to do it in other places that were in crisis. Is that how the timeline worked?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, we started out doing this under the umbrella of the organization in Romania, and then we started doing it just freelance. But then, then when it came to raising money, we were asking people, well, could you send the money to this charity in the UK and then they'll send it on to Ukraine? Or could you send money to my friend's charity in California and she'll send it to Ukraine? Which isn't ideal. Sometimes donors say, oh, okay, are you sure about that? But like you said, that the light bulb went off. Like, well, we could do this on our own. We don't need to depend on somebody else to do it. We can start our own nonprofit, and through that we can really, manage the finances, we have full accountability for how the resources are being used and the reporting back to the donors and everything. And so that was really, this work in Ukraine really was the impetus of starting Animals Unbound.